There we go. Now, does anybody have any specific questions from the study guides that you want me to cover? Or does anybody want to volunteer for me to go over one of your study guides? All right. Well, I guess if I don't hear anything different, I'll just try to go through the study guides and see how many we can do, how much we can get done before 8:50. There's not any attendance words because this is all voluntary. And like I said, it's being recorded, so I can see who's here, and whoever's here will get a little extra credit. Let's see. All right. Let me pull this up before I share my screen. My computer's being a little bit slow. Here we go. 16. All right. Now, share my screen. All right, let's look at the first study guide. Let me make sure yep, we're good. So, can someone confirm you can hear me and see the screen?
I can't see the screen, but I can hear you.
So you can't see the study guide right now?
No, I can't see anything but your name.
I can see the study guide.
Huh. Okay.
Oh shoot! Now I can see it. Never mind.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you guys. All right. So, like I said, I'll I guess just go through these, and unless somebody has a question, or a specific question that they need help with. So here we go. What is biology? Yeah. So, like I said in the lecture, my definition that I like is a little bit different than what's in the textbook, and I don't usually do that, but when I do, I make sure you know. And this is one of those instances, right? So, biology is the scientific study of life. Any questions about that? All right. Few people got this question wrong. I think maybe they missed the part where it says not. Which of these is not a function of life or a property of life? Let's see. Populations of organisms rarely change over time. So that's the correct answer, because that word rarely makes it not a property of life. And I could reword that for the exam to say populations of organisms do change over time, right? And that would make that one a correct statement. And I could change this one to say living things do not exhibit complex but ordered organization, in which case that would not be a property of life. Does everybody understand? So you're supposed to pick what's not a property of life, and I can change any of these to be that correct answer. All right. Which structure can perform all the activities required for life? Simply cells. There's not much to say about that. All these other things, these other choices are things that make up cells. A reliable source about the usefulness of an herbal supplement is likely to be recognizable by all of the following, or all but one of the following characteristics. So once again, here we have a list of things that you should look for, and one of them is something that you would not look for. Sorry, let me take care of that. So the information isn't a primary source. No, that's a good thing, right? You want your information to be from a primary source if possible. The information is published in a peer-reviewed journal. Nope, that's also something you should look for. Many references are cited. Nope, not really. So it's good if there's a lot of references cited, I guess, but it's not necessarily any kind of benchmark. We're like, oh, well, there's a lot of references cited, so that's good. So that's the answer. Let me see. Sorry. Nope, this one's even better. I apologize. I spoke too soon. The authors are employed by the manufacturer of the supplement. That should be a red flag, right? When you're looking for a reliable source about the usefulness of an herbal supplement, obviously there's going to be a little bit of a bias from an employee of the people that make it. Does that make sense? Or I should say, are there any questions? All right, well, let's move on then. Science is blank. this is one that people usually miss, and they usually get this. All the answers are correct. But that's not the correct answer. I tried to reiterate that in lecture because even though, well, let's just make it quick because we're short on time. It is an organized set of principles. No, sorry. The inquiry-based effort to describe and explain nature, right? It's trying to describe and explain nature. The search for truth, that's kind of a vague statement. Even though we do use an organized set of principles for how to behave ethically and morally for science, that in itself isn't science, right? Those are just the rules that we have for science. So that's why all these other ones would be incorrect. Any questions about that? All right. Which of these statements is correct? Scientific ideas are subjected to repeated testing. Yep, that is correct. Science can be used to prove or disprove the ideas that deities or spirits cause earthquakes, blah, blah, blah. That's obviously not correct, right? We mentioned that science can't be used to prove or disprove anything supernatural. However, this correct answer, I could change it to be an incorrect option by saying scientific ideas are only repeated or subjected to testing once or something like that, right? And this one I could change it to say science cannot be used to prove or disprove the idea, blah, blah, and making that a correct one. So once again, I'll remind you, when you're studying these, don't just memorize the answer because the answer will change. So make sure you understand the concept that brings you to the correct answer. Which statement is good grief. Which statement is a valid hypothesis? There we go. Okay. Human history is determined by a series of supernatural events. Nope. Once again, it has to be something that we can falsify and test, and we can't do that with supernatural things. Humans should help in the conservation of other animal species. I agree with that statement, but it is not a hypothesis. It's a statement, right? It's just a declaration, which is not what a hypothesis is. Humans are controlled by forces beyond our understanding. Once again, not a hypothesis because a valid hypothesis because we can't test it, we can't falsify it. So finally, the best answer is humans and bacteria share a common genetic code because that is something we can test. That is something we can verify and falsify. So are there any questions about that one? All right. A study may be pseudoscience. This is good stuff here. It's good to know about pseudoscience. The evidence is anecdotal. Yep, that's one red flag that it could be pseudoscience. It could be fake, pretending to be real. The results are published in a journal where studies are reviewed, but no, peer-reviewed is a good thing. So that's not the answer, right? The experimenters use controlled experiments. Once again, that's not a red flag. That's something good. And then finally, statistical analyses are performed on experimental results. Once again, a good thing. So any questions about that one? All right, you try to start your car, but it does not start. Which of these is a prediction? My car's battery is dead. If I recharge the battery, then my car will start. My car is too old to function properly. Or what is wrong with my car? So the answer is B. So remember, for this course, basically predictions are if-then statements, right? They have an if-then in them that describes how you're going to test a hypothesis. So if your observation is that A, my car's battery is dead, then your question is D, what is wrong with my car? Then one of your hypotheses could be C, my car is too old to function properly. Well, that wouldn't be a good hypothesis. Well, I guess if my car's battery is dead would be a better hypothesis in this example. But anyway, again, for the prediction, which is the question for this one, it's if-then statement. So if I recharge the battery, then my car will start. So any questions about that one? Obviously, if you get a question like that on the exam, it'll be something different than a car battery, but same concept. So here we go. On a related note, a hypothesis is what? It's let's see, proposed explanation for a set of observations. So far, that seems like the best answer. A guess made in order to determine what observations and explorations are necessary? No, that is incorrect. First of all, it's not really a guess. I don't like to call it a guess. It's second, observation and exploration, that's the first step in the scientific process. So obviously you're not going to have a hypothesis, which is later, and then your hypothesis isn't going to lead to that. Same thing with this, an observation made in order to determine a theory. Theories are well substantiated. We know that. So it's not like they're just based on a couple of observations. So yeah, the answer is A, a proposed explanation for a set of observations. And you'll notice too that the book and I have described it in a couple of ways. Another way you could describe a hypothesis is a little bit longer than that. So maybe a proposed explanation for a set of observations that can be tested and falsified. Anyway, are there any questions? All right. Like I said, if you guys do think of a specific question, please feel free to speak up. Otherwise, we're just going to be doing this, which is pretty boring, but I guess useful. Which sequence shows the step of the process of science and an order in which they might occur? Please note none of these options contain all the steps, so just pick the one in which they're in the correct order. So here we go. We're just looking for something in the correct order, and also one that doesn't have something that shouldn't be there. So experiment, conclusion. So far, that was in the correct order, even though they were towards the end. But then we have exploration, which is the first one. So A is not the correct answer. Question, observation. Nope, that's not correct, right? The observation leads to the question. So skip that one. Observation, hypothesis, prediction, experiment. There we go. That's the correct answer. So again, there were parts missing, right? So we went from observation straight to hypothesis. We skipped question, but that's okay. These are in the correct order, and there's no words in there that shouldn't be there. Excuse me. So any questions about that one? All right. How do hypotheses differ from theories? Basically, before I even go through the answers, hypotheses are more specific. Theories are broader, and they're well substantiated. So that being said, let's really quickly look at the options. Theories are more comprehensive than hypotheses. That is a correct statement. But I'm going to keep reading, which I always recommend doing because there's correct and then sometimes there's more correct. So read all your options. Theories must be testable. No, they've already been well established. So we'll just keep moving from there. Hypotheses are educated guesses. No, they're not, despite what you've been told. But even more so, what's definitely not true, because some people could argue that they're educated guesses, but the theories are tentative explanations. That's not true. Hypotheses are tentative explanations. Remember, theories are well-established explanations. And then finally, the other wrong answer. Hypotheses are derived from experimentation, whereas theories are derived from observation. No, we're talking, it's like somebody took the scientific method and scrambled it up in this question, right? So you observe something, which leads to a question, which then leads to a hypothesis, which then leads to experimentation. And once you've done that a lot, then eventually you might get to a theory. Anyway, any questions about that question? All right. Suppose a scientist wanted to determine if substance retrieved from outer space is alive. Which of the following properties? Oh, here we go. This is sort of like the same question that we talked about earlier, except it's just, worded differently. Here we have a list of properties of life, and we need to choose the one that is not a property of life. Having a clear, orderly arrangement, that is the property of life. So we'll keep going. Maintaining a constant temperature in an environment in which the temperature is variable, that is a property of life. Being multicolored, there you go. Never said anything about being multicolored as a property of life. And again, like I said, read all the options because you never know. Being made of cells, that is also a property of life. So the correct answer is C, because being multicolored is not a property of life. Obviously, for the exam, you could assume I'm going to change that if we get that question. We probably won't be talking about something retrieved from outer space. And then the wrong option will probably not be being multicolored. I'll probably change it to something else ridiculous, but you should generally, you'll probably get a question very similar to this. Any questions? All right. Excuse me. A scientist wishes wishes to test a new antibiotic's ability to treat stubborn bacterial infections. He tests his hypothesis that the antibiotic works better than the existing treatments by giving bacterial infections to mice and treating them with the antibiotic. He then determines how many of the mice recover from the infections. What is he missing from his experimental design? Let's look at all the options here. He's missing a control group of mice that received a half dose of the new antibiotic. So that kind of sounds good. Let's keep reading. He is missing a control group of mice that did not receive the new antibiotic. Okay. Nothing is missing. He has done everything he needs to do. So let's take a look again. He tests his hypothesis by giving bacterial infections to mice and treating them with the antibiotic. Yep. So I would say control group did not receive. This is the better answer. This is the best answer. He is missing a control group of mice that did not receive the new antibiotic. See, once again, this is why is a good example of why you should read all the options, because the first one, I read this, I'm like, yeah, that would be good. He is missing a control group of mice that received half the dose. That also would be good. But yeah, you definitely need a control group that did not receive it, right? That's even more important. So any questions about that? Again, obviously, if you get a question like that on the exam, it would be similar, but it might not be about antibiotics and mice. It would be something different, but the same kind of scenario. Which of the following partial lists correctly presents levels of organization from simplest to smallest? So here we go. This is another list question, like the one we just did for the scientific method. So we're looking at the list and looking for it to be in the correct order. So let's look at start here. Organ system. So all right, we're on the right track because we are getting from smaller to larger. Organelles. Nope. Organelles make up cells. So we're done with that one. Biosphere. Nope. That's pretty much as big as it gets. So we're not going to start with that one. Molecules. Yeah. Molecules make up organelles. Organelles make up cells. That's good. Then we skip a lot of stuff. Organisms. Organisms make up populations, and populations do make up ecosystems. So yeah, this one is the correct order. There's a lot of things missing in between, but it is in the correct order. But again, like I said, let's look at all the options. Atoms, organelles, molecules, organisms. Yes, see? This is one now I remember now. I've had to go and physically change people's grade for this, and I need to fix this question. These are both correct answers. Both of these two bottom answers go from smaller to larger. Any questions? All right. All dogs are mammals. My golden retriever is a dog. Actually, that one's not going to be, I'm not going to have any of those questions on the exam. Let me skip through. A little short on time. Deductive, inductive, we're not going to talk about. Or descriptive, hypothesis based. This one might be on there. Okay. A scientist is trying to determine the average lifespan of a newly discovered frog species. The scientist is excited because very little known is about the species. What kind of science is this? This is just basic science, right? They're not necessarily trying to solve any problem that society is having. Like there's some scientists right now who are trying to figure out better ways of capturing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, right? That's has a purpose. But in this example, we're talking about basic science. It's knowledge for the sake of knowledge. And obviously in the exam, if you get a question like this, it probably wouldn't be about frogs. I would probably change it up. But anyway, any questions about that? All right, next one. This is kind of similar. A team of scientists working on cold viruses. One scientist is trying to develop a drug that can treat the common cold. So there we go. That's applied science. Another scientist is trying to develop a vaccine to prevent the spread of a common cold. Once again, applied science. If they succeed, they can save lives and make money. What kind of science is this? Again, applied science. We're not going this. So anyway, sorry, any questions about that? All right, these questions will not be on the exam just because they take too long. If you only have 50 minutes, you're not going to have time to read a whole passage and then answer a few questions about that passage. So I'll skip through that. Once again, same situation. And then, I don't know. I tried to do vocabulary on there for you, but that definitely won't be on the exam. So any questions about the first study guide before we jump into the second study guide? All right. So while I'm pulling that up, I'll remind everybody, if you have Monday Lab, we still have lab today. Here we go. Study Guide, Chapter 2. Does anybody have any specific questions from Chapter 2 that you want me to cover? All right. So blank is an example of an element. This is almost a useless question as far as an exam review is concerned, because obviously all these options would change, but nitrogen is an example of an element. And, just think about all the different options I could use. I would definitely use an element that we've talked about before, like oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, phosphorus, beryllium, something you've heard of. But even if you didn't remember the element, you would also have very common options, the wrong options, like water, glucose, and salt. Like this are very obviously not an element. So any questions about that? All right. More the big four, basically, right? That's what this question is asking. What are the big four? And it's carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen. And hopefully that'll be easy for you to remember after lab with you drawing those molecules so often. In order to have a positive charge, an atom must have what? And remember, protons are positive, electrons are negative. This seems to be one of the hardest concepts this semester for some of you. Just remember, protons are positive and electrons are negative. And that's easy to remember because proton starts with P. And like I've said before, it's a negative thing to get electrocuted, right? So if you can remember electricity is negative, think about it that way, then electrons are negative. So that being said, if an atom ever has more protons than electrons, it has a positive charge. If an atom ever has more electrons than protons, it has a negative charge. So it's really that simple. Anyway, let's go back to this specific question. In order to have a positive charge, an atom must have, more protons than electrons. That is a correct statement, right? If it had more electrons than protons, it would be negative. Neutrons don't matter in this conversation because they're neutral. So these two options are useless for that reason. Any questions about that one? All right. All atoms of an element must have the same number of what? In other words, an element is defined by its number of what? And its protons, right? So again, if you change the number of electrons, like we're talking about up there, then you have an ion, which we'll talk about that later in the study guide. But if you change the number of protons, then you have a completely new element. So any questions about that one? All right. An atom's blank are found in its nucleus, simply the neutrons and the protons. Not much else to say about that one. It's pretty straightforward. Any questions about that? All right. Beryllium's atomic mass is 9. Its atomic number is 4. How many protons are found in beryllium atom? I feel like this is kind of like a trick question. These questions were written by the people that made your old textbook. So I think they're trying to trick you into doing a math question, but it's not. Really, all the information you need is where it says its atomic number is 4. So if its atomic number is 4, that means it has 4 protons, right? Because the atomic number is how many protons it has. So if its atomic number is 4, it has 4 protons. However, if it said beryllium's atomic mass is 9, its atomic number is 4, how many neutrons are found in a beryllium atom, then you would need to do some math, right? Because we know the atomic number is the number of protons. We know the atomic mass is the number of protons plus neutrons. So we would say, all right, 4 protons plus how many neutrons gives us an atomic mass of 9. So 4 plus what equals 9? And then the answer would be 5 if that's what the question was asking. Any questions about that? All right. Here we go. An uncharged atom of mercury has an atomic number of 80 and an atomic mass of 200. This atom has blank protons, blank neutrons, and blank electrons. First of all, let me point this out because I've said this before, and I want to make sure this is very clear. I didn't write this question. In this course, if I don't need to say uncharged. If I say it's an atom and don't mention it having a positive or negative charge, you can safely assume that it is uncharged. Anyway, so the idea here is that you understand what these numbers mean, right? You're not supposed to memorize anything about mercury. I didn't teach you anything about mercury. You don't need to know anything about mercury. I'd probably change this element if this were on the exam. But anyway, the idea here is it has 80. Its atomic number is 80. Therefore, we know it has 80 protons. So we know A or D are the only options now. An atomic mass of 200. So 80 protons plus how many neutrons gives us 200. So the answer is 120. So there we go. 80 protons, 120 neutrons. And again, because it's not charged, if it has 80 protons, it must also have 80 electrons. So any questions about that? All right, we will move forward. Isotopes of an element have the same number of blank and a different number of blank. Obviously, they have to have the same number of protons. Otherwise, they would be different elements. So that leaves us A or B, right? The other two are not options. And different number of what? Well, the answer is A, right? Same number of protons, different number of neutrons. If you change the number of protons, you would get a new element. And if we change the number of electrons, like we said here, then we wouldn't be dealing with an isotope. We would be dealing with an ion. So any questions about this? All right. An atom with an electrical charge is an ion. There's not much else to say about that. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, just something you need to memorize. An atom with an electrical charge is an ion. How do radioactive isotopes differ from isotopes? Long story short, they're radioactive. They're not stable. So let's look at those options. Radioactive isotopes have more neutrons. Not necessarily. Radioactives are stable. No, they're not stable. That's the opposite of true. Radioactive isotopes have fewer. No, I haven't said anything about the number of neutrons. Here we go. Radioactive isotopes are unstable. Isotopes are stable. So any questions about that probably won't be on the exam. All right, the bond between oppositely charged ions is what kind of bond? Well, we just got finished talking about it. If these we're dealing with charged ions, so it's an ionic bond. It should be pretty straightforward. Any questions about that one? All right, consider the following reaction. What type of bond is holding the two atoms together? This almost definitely won't be on the exam. I didn't teach this during the lecture, but the fact that you can see this one's positive, this one's negative, you can see that there's charges here. We're dealing with ions, therefore it's an ionic bond. So that's how you would know it, but again, that's probably not going to be on the exam. And plus this thing was all wonky. That K plus should be down here. But anyway, any questions about that one? All right, moving on to a different type of bond. What name is given to bonds that involve the sharing of electrons? It's covalent, right? So that prefix of co, we should think of share, right? Like cooperating, when people are sharing responsibilities. Cohabitating, they're sharing a place to live. So any questions about that one? All right, sulfur has an atomic number of 16. How many covalent bonds can it form? All right, let's do some math here. So it has an atomic number of 16. That means it has 16 protons. And because I didn't say anything about it being charged, we know it also has 16 electrons. So if we have 2 on the inside and then 8 more on the next ring, so that's 10 out of 16. All right, so the outermost ring holds 6. Hope you guys can picture what I'm saying here, right? The first ring holds 2. The second ring holds 8, and that's a total of 10. So then we're only left with 6 more. So that goes on the outermost ring. So the outermost ring has 6, but it's supposed to have 8. So it needs 2 more. Therefore, sulfur can bond 2 times. Basically just those charts you did in the second lab. And obviously, I would probably change the element if you were to get this question on the exam, because it's not important that you understand how many covalent bonds sulfur can form. It's important that you can understand how many bonds an element can form if we tell you what the atomic number is. Anyway, are there any questions about that one? All right, hydrogen and oxygen atoms of a water molecule held together by what? And the answer is covalent bonds. This question will most likely be on the exam or some version of it. And there's another one that asks what holds adjacent water molecules together, and that answer is hydrogen bonds. And I can almost guarantee you that'll be one of the most missed questions on the exam. So I'm telling you right now, don't miss it. People are going to miss it. But if we're talking about a single water molecule, one oxygen and two hydrogens, those are covalent bonds bringing them together. So if we're talking about multiple water molecules, those are hydrogen bonds. So don't mess it up. Excuse me. Any questions about that? All right. Adjacent water molecules interact with one another via what kind of bonds? There we go. It's like I was saying. This is the other question. So these two questions together confuse people. And I'm not doing it to be confusing you. That's why I'm warning you now. Be ready for it. But anyway, adjacent water molecules, they interact with each other via hydrogen bonds. And I don't know if this is a good way, but one of the ways to remember that is it can't be covalent bonds that are holding adjacent water molecules together. If they were being held together by covalent bonds, they would no longer be technically adjacent water molecules. They would be one molecule, right? If they're being held together by covalent bonds, then at that point they are a molecule. So anyway, any questions about that one? All right. Why is water considered a polar molecule? The oxygen is found between the two hydrogen atoms. So far, that's the best option, but so far that's the only one. So let's keep looking. The oxygen atom attracts the hydrogen atoms. Ooh, that's also true. The oxygen end of the molecule has a slight negative charge. Yes. And the hydrogen end has a slight positive. Yes. That is the best answer so far. Both hydrogen atoms are at one end of the water molecule, and the oxygen is also true. So this is a great question. And C is the correct answer. And I like it because all the other options are correct statements, but sometimes you have to pick the most correct statement. So any questions about that? All right. Similarly, here we go. Adjacent water molecules interact through, like we just already said, hydrogen bonds. So in a sense, this question is asking you the definition of a hydrogen bond, in a sense. So anyway, let's look at it. Sharing of electrons between the hydrogen, no. I'll tell you why. I don't even need to finish reading. We're not sharing electrons. If they were sharing electrons, that would be a covalent bond, and therefore they wouldn't be adjacent water molecules. It would just be one molecule. Electrical attraction, we're on something here, between the hydrogen of one water molecule and the oxygen of another. Yes, that seems correct so far. Do you have a question?
Oh, sorry. My mind was.
Oh, no problem.
Sorry, I just this kicked me out of the meeting, so I just came back and it just like left my mic open. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, just making sure there wasn't any questions. Anyway, so adjacent water molecules, yeah. So far, we said the best answer is B, electrical attraction. C, sharing electrons. Again, I'm not even going to look at that because we're not talking about sharing electrons. They would be one molecule. One molecule at that point. Electrical attraction. Here we go. Between the hydrogen atoms of adjacent water molecules. So that's almost correct, but it's not the hydrogen atoms of one water molecule attracted to the hydrogen atoms of another. No, it's this one, between the hydrogen of one and the oxygen of the other. So any questions about that? All right. When a base is added to a buffered solution, the buffer will what? So, you just need to remember what buffers do. They resist changes in pH. So basically they do what's the opposite of what's being done to them. So if we're talking about adding a base, there's two different ways to describe that. We're saying we're adding OH minus ions is one way to look at it. Or I guess you could technically look at it as we're adding something that accepts H plus ions. So with that in mind, let's look at the options. Donates OH minus ions. No, because that's what a base does. So we wanted to do the opposite of what the base does. So that wouldn't be it. Accepts water molecules. Nope. Here we go. The opposite of a base, right? So it's donating H plus ions, right? It's basically, in this case, the buffer is acting like an acid because this is what an acid does. It donates H plus ions. So any questions about that? All right, here's one I just told you. You just needed to memorize the number. Human body cells are approximately how much water? 70 to 95%. It's just a number you need to memorize. Pretty straightforward. Any questions about that? All right. The tendency of molecules of the same kind to stick together is called. So here we go. The same kind. So that is cohesion. Right? So water is cohesive. Water molecules stick together. These are all good options. Well, polarity is really out there, but the other two I could see being tricky. So yeah, just remember cohesion is when something sticks together. Any questions about that? All right. Some tiny insects are able to walk on water. Why? Well, because of water surface tension. So let's look at these options here. Water has adhesive properties. Yep, that's correct. Surface tension that is the result of water's cohesive properties make it possible. Ooh, that's even more correct. The covalent bonds that hold the water molecule together make this possible. It's true. Yeah, that's true, but that's not the best answer. A single insect is less dense than water, and that's not necessarily true. So the answer is B. B is the most correct answer. So once again, I'll remind you, look at all your options because it's not just always the correct answer, but the most correct answer. As water freezes, all right, think about what you know about water. Obviously, when it freezes, that means it's cold. And also, you know, it floats. So let's keep that in mind. It floats. What makes it float? So let's look at the options. Its molecules move farther apart. So far, that's it, right? Because as molecules move farther apart, that makes something less dense, which makes it float, right? Anyway, it cools the surrounding environment. That is not true. It's the surrounding environment that's cooling the water, which is why it's freezing. Its hydrogen bonds break apart, and that's not true either. The water molecules become less polar, also not true. So there we go. A is the only correct statement anyway. Any questions about that? Sugar dissolves when stirred into coffee. The coffee is the blank, the sugar is the blank, and the sweetener is the blank. So here we go. When you mix a solute in a solvent, then you get a solution, right? So in this case, the coffee is the solution because the sweetened coffee. Sorry, let me look at the bigger picture here. I'll take my own advice here. The coffee is the solvent because the coffee is dissolving the solute, which is the sugar, and then what it results in is sweetened coffee, which is the solution. So solvent, solute, solution. Solvent, solute, solution. So C is the correct answer. Any questions about that one? All right, so that's a good one. That question or some version of that question could be on either of these exams. Because really, this is something we're really going to cover, oddly enough, this week, where we're talking about osmosis and diffusion and things like that, and cell membranes. And anyway, any questions? All right, a base. We've already talked about this. What's a base do? It removes H plus from a solution, right? And of course, I could reword this to say adds OH minus to a solution, in which case C would be the correct answer. Or I could put increases the pH of a solution, in which case B would be the correct answer. And anything to do with H2O would pretty much always be an incorrect answer. So any questions about that? Relative to a pH of 7, a pH of 4 has blank. All right, so we're going from 7 to 4. So we know we're going down the pH scale, which means we're becoming more acidic, which means there's going to be more H plus ions or fewer OH minus ions, depending on how you look at it. So let's look at this. All right, in this example, we are dealing with the wording is talking about the H plus ions, so we need to be talking about an increase. So higher, higher, higher. So that eliminates D because we're not going to have lower concentrations. Now let's look at the numbers. We're going from 4 to 7. So from 4 to 5 is 1 step. From 5 to 6 is 2 steps. From 6 to 7 is 3 steps. And each step is a multiple of 10. So we have 3 steps, right? So 10, then multiply that by 10. So that's 100. Multiply that by 10. That's 1,000. So the answer is B. 1,000 times higher H plus concentration. And remember, don't memorize that. Understand how to do it because the numbers are going to be different. the description might be different. Like I said, I could say instead of a 1,000 times higher H plus concentration, I could change this to say 1,000 times lower OH minus concentration. Or, yeah. But anyway, you can see how I could change it. And obviously, the numbers might not be 7 to 4. It might be 4 to 7. Or it might be some other kind of difference in the numbers. But anyway, any questions about that? We already talked about this. What name is given to a substance that resists changes in pH? It's a buffer. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we're still recording. Here we go. What is the outcome of evaporative cooling in the form of sweating? That's so easy. It's probably not going to be on there. Like, why do you sweat? You sweat to cool yourself off, right? So it's a decrease in body temperature. An atom has 20 protons, 20 neutrons, 20 electrons. What atom is being described? And this is nothing you would need to memorize, but all your options give you all the information you need to know. So if it has 20 protons, that means we know its atomic number. Its atomic number is 20. So with that information, let's move forward. Neon, nope, that's atomic number 10. Here we go, atomic number 20. The answer is calcium. So again, don't memorize that calcium has 20 protons and that its atomic number is 20. That's not important. What's important is if you get this information for a different element, you'll be able to recognize it. So remember, the number of protons is its atomic number. Any questions about that? All right, the pH scale. How does apple juice compare to lemon juice? So apple juice, lemon juice. Here we go. So one step. We know apple juice is less acidic than lemon juice. We know apple juice is more basic than lemon juice. We know lemon juice is more acidic than apple juice. We know lemon juice is less basic than apple juice. We know lemon juice has a higher H plus concentration than apple juice. We know lemon juice has a lower OH minus concentration than apple juice, right? All these different ways of saying the same thing. So keep that in mind because there's no telling how it's going to be written on the exam. So with that in mind, then we just do, at least the math is concrete. We know that it's a 10 times different, right? So lemon is 10 times more acidic than apple, or apple is 10 times more basic than lemon juice, right? So let's look at all these options. B and D are the only ones that have the correct numbers. So we can forget A and C because it's only one step. So that's only a multiple of 10. So lemon juice has a 10 times higher. Yep, that's the correct answer. Lemon juice has a 10 times higher H plus concentration. And I could change that to say, lemon juice has a 10 times lower OH minus concentration than apple juice, right? So again, don't memorize these numbers. Don't memorize the exact correct answer as written. Understand how to answer those questions yourself. Single carbon atom can form a maximum of how many covalent bonds? 4. And once again, I would assume, I'm hoping that's easy for you just because of that lab. Hopefully you just have so much practice drawing carbons with those 4 bonds that that'll come easy to you. But anyway, any questions about that one? All right. What name is given to this reaction? And this isn't anything you need to memorize, but here, when we have water on the right-hand side of the equation, which in this class is always the product side, so water was produced. You can tell by the fact that it's on the right-hand side and because there's an arrow right there. That makes it a dehydration reaction, right? When water is produced, it's a dehydration reaction. So you don't need to memorize the fact that galactose plus glucose gives you lactose plus water. But the fact is we have water on the production side. And that's what makes it a dehydration reaction. So any questions about that? All right. This is the opposite. Excuse me. What name is given to the following reaction? Here we have water in the reactant side, not the product. So if it's used as a reactant, then it's hydrolysis. Any questions about that? All right, which item? Excuse me. No, you do not need to memorize any examples of isomers, so I'll keep moving. You need to know what an isomer is, but not an example of one. Complete the equation. Blank plus blank gives us blank plus water. Excuse me. Mono plus mono gives us blank plus water, right? So 1 plus 1 is what? 2. So the answer is A, disaccharide. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Monosaccharide, one saccharide plus one saccharide gives us two saccharide. Any questions about that? All right. What can you conclude about the following reaction? Let's see. Lactose plus glucose gives us lactose and water. Glucose and lactose are both disaccharides. No, that one makes sense. This is an example of hydrolysis reaction. No, because again, water's on the wrong side. Lactose is a disaccharide and glucose is a monosaccharide. Yes, you can decipher that from the information given in this, right? Because we know, like I said, if there's water on the product side, that means it's a dehydration reaction. And you need to know that dehydration reactions are when we build molecules, right? We're bringing molecules together as opposed to breaking them up. So obviously we're going to need, that means if it's on the right side, it's going to be a larger molecule. So it would make sense that that would be a disaccharide. Any questions about that? All right. Table sugar is simply, it's just sucrose, a disaccharide. That's just one of those things you need to know. So the answer is D. This is also a really important one, not just for this exam, but for a lot of things moving forward in this semester. A protein's function is dependent on environmental factors such as pH and temperature. What property of the protein itself dictates its function? And the answer is shape. It's all about the shape. I mean, the length has something to do with the shape. So does the size. So does the weight. But all those things together, come together to determine the shape. And the shape is the most important. Any questions about that? All right. Which molecule is an example of a polysaccharide? Hopefully you can recognize that as starch. And again, the pre-lab, hopefully that'll help you memorize that because that was one of the questions in the pre-lab. Any questions about that? All right. Plants use which molecule as an energy storing carbohydrate? Starch. Remember, cellulose is used for plant structure. Glycogen is used for animal energy storage. Starch is used as plant energy storage, and maltose was just thrown in there as a completely off-the-wall option. Excuse me. Any questions about that? Dang. But here we go again. Similar question. Cellulose is an example of what? It is also a polysaccharide. Remember, it is the thing that gives plant wall. It's this basically what makes up a plant cell wall. Which substance is hydrophilic? So just think back to the big picture. We know that carbohydrates are hydrophilic, lipids are hydrophobic, and the other two we didn't really discuss. There's no reason for that as far as they're being hydrophilic or hydrophobic. But anyway, so hydrophilic we know is some sort of carb. So which one of these is a carb? And the answer is cellulose. Another way of looking at it is like I like to call it the one of these things is not like the other, right? So here you have, cellulose is it's a carbohydrate, but even if you don't remember that a carbohydrate is hydrophilic, you can remember it's like, all right, testosterone, butter, cholesterol, those are all types of lipids, and cellulose is not a type of lipid. And in this case, the one of these things is not like the other approach would work for you. Any questions about that? All right. Sometimes when I have my coffee, which I drink black with no cream or sugar, so there's nothing in the coffee. Notice a thin film floating on top of the coffee. So look at this. There's blank in my coffee. So let's think about this. Coffee is ground up coffee beans mixed with water. So if there's anything floating at the top that's not mixing in with it, that means it's hydrophobic. So the answer is right there, hydrophobic substance, right? Because it's not mixing in with my water-based coffee. Any questions about that? All right. A fat contains which molecular components? Specifically, we're talking about a triglyceride, right? So it does have 3 fatty acids, but not only. So here we go. 3 fatty acids and 1 not steroid. So that makes that incorrect. Here we go. 3 fatty acids and 1 glycerol molecule. That is what makes up a fat, a triglyceride. Any questions about that? We're running short on time. What name is given to the following reaction? Once again, we have water molecules on the right-hand side of the equation on the product side, so that therefore it is a dehydration reaction. So with the less than 1 minute we have left, I'll just, because we're not going to finish this, I'll remind you and anybody watching the video, just because I've already done this doesn't mean I won't do it again. So if you want to meet me online sometime to where I go over your study guides and talk about your incorrect answers, then let me know and we can do that too, because you have until Friday to do the exam. And I think that's it. Otherwise, we'll see you Monday, people, in lab today. Make sure you do your pre-lab. Again, if you don't have your pre-lab done, you can't come to lab. So any questions about the exam or lab or anything else? All right, then.
Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you guys for coming.